back to Love Your Food. This week we have a classic French dish for you, a very involved recipe. This is probably our most complicated recipe on the channel. Definitely going to be our longest video to date. And it is Boeuf Bourguignon. This is a classic French dish. It is beef braised in red wine. It's a classic of the Burgundy region. And here's what we're going to be using. So we have some beef cheek. That's what we're going to be using as our beef. We have some beautiful thick bacon. We're going to be using some parsley. This is mostly going to be for garnish at the end. There is some butter in order to cook our mushrooms. Some beef broth. We have these beautiful pearl onions. You can also use cipollini. Tomato paste. A little bit of flour. We have a bay leaf. Some garlic. Carrot. We have some nice fresh thyme. We'll be using one large white onion and some red wine. This is from a local winery here in Ontario called Casaba. This is their 2011 Cabernet Sauvignon. Really, really excellent wine. Highly recommend it if you can find it. So to get started, we are going to cut our bacon into lardons, which is basically just cutting it into small pieces in order to render it a little faster and easier. Now, we usually buy a pretty thick cut bacon, but we noticed that in the package we got, there were a few pieces that were just a little too thick to be made into regular breakfast bacon, so this is the perfect use for that. These are a little too thick to get crispy for morning breakfast bacon, so we are going to use it in this recipe and just render it into these nice little crispy lardons. And that's about the size you want them to be, what you can see here is with Chef Caleb. We're going to include all that nice bacon fat in there as well, and you'll see why as we're getting things cooked. So just get everything cooked, cut into nice small pieces there. And from here, we're going to get that into a pretty large pot. And we're just going to get that into the bottom of it. It's already over some heat. So this is going to start rendering pretty quickly. Now you don't want to burn it, so you want to keep it over sort of a medium or medium-high heat. Not all the way up to high. And you want to make sure you've got good contact with the pan. And it's all got a lot of good space in there, so it can all render nicely. So while that is rendering, we are going to prepare our beef. So we have these beautiful beef cheeks. So we've already removed the silver skin from the outside of this. There is some on the inside as well. We're going to leave that because in the long and slow cooking process, that's actually all going to become tender. Once it was all cooked, we did not notice it at all. You can see it in there in the cheek, but it's really not going to become an issue at all once it's been cooked. So we just want to get it into these nice pieces. They are going to cook thoroughly over time. Just a little quick stir on our bacon. Not quite where we want it to be yet. We want some good color on there before we take it out. But you can see all the fat rendering out. That is perfect. We're going to be using a lot of that. But here's about where we want it. So you see those nice crispy bits stuck to the bottom of the pan, and the bacon is nice and brown. So what we're going to do is set that aside to drain for a little while. So we're going to just got a bowl on our stove here. Our oven is going as well. We've got it preheated, so this is going to stay a little bit warm. And we're just going to set this aside. We don't want to use all of the fat from the bacon to cook with, so we're going to drain most of it. Now, we do reserve our bacon fat because it is extremely useful in the kitchen. And you can see we're leaving some in the bottom of the pan with all those beautiful crispy bits. And that's going to go onto the heat once again. And once it is back up to heat, we are going to take our beef, which we've seasoned with salt and pepper here. We're going to do this in 2 stages. We're just going to show you the one, though. And in the beef goes. So that is going to cook in our bacon fat. So make sure you're getting some good contact of the beef on that hot pan covered in that nice bacon fat. And then you're going to season the other side as well. So give it a good seasoning, a little bit of salt, a little bit of black pepper. Really get that nice Maillard reaction so you have that beautiful sear on there. In the meantime, we're going to get our onion ready. So the onion is going to be, we want to cut this very fine. It's going to be quite a small dice, honestly. We also have those nice pearl onions. We're going to leave those whole. We're just going to peel them, which is a bit of a pain, but definitely worth it in the end. We're going to leave them whole, though, because we do want the nice texture from those. This onion is pretty much going to disappear. The carrot we're going to leave in large chunks because we want that nice texture and color. So this is going to stay mostly in the same shape after the long cooking process. It's going to soften nicely, but it's going to be large chunks. Once your beef is good and seared, you have this lovely fond, those flavorful crispy bits stuck to the bottom of the pan. So we're going to take all of our beef out of the pan. And we're going to set it aside with the bacon. So it's all nicely seared. It's got some good color on all sides. And then into our pan is going to go our onions and carrots. And we're going to get a little bit of color. We're going to get the onions sort of nicely wilted and translucent. I'm just going to get a start on getting those carrots just slightly browned. Or at least slightly sweated a little bit. A little bit of salt in there. And just a tiny splash of the beef broth. Just a tiny bit. And what we're going to do is scrape up all those beautiful flavors from the bottom. That nice sear from the beef and the bacon. And we're going to get that mixed in with the onion and carrot just to get that started and get those nice flavors mixed and combined. You can see it's coming up really easily. We're deglazing with that beef broth, and that's just going to add an amazing flavor to the final product. So once we've got that going, this is after it's been covered for a little while. We uncovered it, and you can see those onions are nicely sweated. They're pretty translucent at this point. And we're going to get our beef and bacon back in there. So it's time to get all of that meat back in the pot. There we go. So that is all of our meat back in the pot. Over top of those nicely sweated onions and carrots. And then on top of that, we're going to add a little bit of flour. So this is where the flour comes in. So because there's already quite a bit of fat in there, we've got the bacon fat and the beef fat from rendering the beef. The flour is going to combine with everything and make sort of a roux, which is going to thicken the final sauce. So this is going to make its own gravy as it cooks, and this flour mixed with the fat is going to help thicken it and give it a little bit of body. Now we don't want it to be raw, so we're just going to toss it into the oven for about 4 minutes. Meanwhile, we're going to start our nice pearl onions. So we have a little bit of our bacon fat here. It's nice in a hot pan. And you can see it's nice and shimmery. It's all melted, and we're just going to get our onions in there. And after a few minutes, the onions have started to get a little bit of color. And it's time to take out our beef again with the flour. So the flour has cooked a little bit now. It's been in that oven for a little while. We're going to combine it with everything else in there. So make sure that it's well stirred in. Gives it a chance to combine with the fats and for all of the juices to mix in with everything. And once you've got that well combined, Just a nice little stir in there. We're actually going to toss this back in the oven for another short time. So this is going to go in for another 4 minutes. And back in we go, and it can stay uncovered. And we're just going to let that cook for another 4 minutes in there. While that's happening, we're going to get our garlic ready. Now, for this recipe, we're using a smashed garlic, so what Chef Caleb is going to do here is he's going to chop it very finely. And then once he's got that fine chop, what he's going to do is just crush it with the edge of his knife. You've seen us use this before. A little bit of salt on there. And just a soft crushing motion with the side of the knife until you get this nice onion paste. It really changes sort of the texture of the garlic. So after a few more minutes, we've got a lot of really nice color on our pearl onions. And that also means it's time to take our beef and veggies back out of the oven. And we're going to get in our tomato paste and garlic in there. So that was the garlic we just smashed, along with the tomato paste. And we just want to give that a little stir so it's combined a little bit. You don't want it in big clumps when everything's said and done. So we're just going to get that a little bit mixed in with everything. And then once you've got that well combined, we're going to add in 3 cups of red wine. This is almost an entire bottle of red wine. And this is going to be the main body of our braising liquid, which is why this is sort of a luxurious, rich, wintry dish. You've got all this red wine in there. It's got that great color. It's got that amazing flavor and aroma. Now we do want our beef to be covered, so we're just going to give it a little stir. And if the 3 cups of red wine is not quite enough to cover everything completely, we're just going to add a little bit of our beef stock. So we didn't have to add much here. The red wine pretty much covered everything, but just to make sure, we're just going to add a little bit of that beef stock. There we go. That's perfect. That's everything covered in there. We're also going to add a bay leaf. And we're going to bring this back up to a simmer on the stove. So the bay leaf goes in. We're going to add a couple sprigs of thyme as well. So we're going to add our fresh thyme. And then we're going to add our nice seared pearl onions. And again, most of this color is going to come off the onions and end up in the sauce, which is great for flavor. It's going to be beautiful in the end. So try to not get as much of the fat in as you can. And if you want to, this is a great time to skim the fat before you add all of this. And we're just going to bring that up to the simmer on the stove. And then once it's at the simmer, we're going to cover it with just a mostly covered little crack in there, and we're going to put it in the oven. But we are going to reduce the temperature quite a lot. So for the previous 2 times we were at 450. We're going to drop that all the way down to 225. And it's going to cook for a long time at that temperature. It's going to be a long, slow, low cooking process to make that beef beautiful and tender. So after a long, long time in the oven, it looks a little bit more like this. This is actually a really excellent time to skim it if you want to. And you can see we still have our little pearl onions in there. The beef is beautiful and tender. Everything's coming apart. Beautiful, rich, amazing stew, but it's not done yet. So what we're going to do now, this is where it gets a little bit more complicated. We are going to drain much of the gravy out of here, as much as we possibly can, without disturbing the meat and veggies too much. And we're going to strain it out. We want a really nice, velvety, smooth gravy in here, this beautiful sauce. And then the onion and carrot is going to go back into the pot with all of the rest of it. And meanwhile, we're going to put a little bit of heat underneath this sauce, just to reduce the gravy a little bit more. And you can see already how nice and velvety smooth that is. It's going to get better. So in the meantime, this is when we're going to finish up our mushrooms. So we're just quartering these. Again, we want that nice sort of chunky stew style. And we're going to cook these separate. So we've got some nice melted butter in the pan here. You can see it foaming up a little bit there. We're going to get our mushrooms in the pan. And then while we're getting a little bit of color with our mushrooms, make sure they're all a little bit covered with that butter. We're going to check on our gravy. So you can see it reducing. It's already reduced quite a lot, and it is still that beautiful, silky, velvety, smooth gravy. While that is going further, we're going to prepare the last couple of little things. So at this point, we are almost ready to serve this, so we're getting our garnish ready. So we're going to take a little bit of this thyme. Got this beautiful, nice, fresh thyme. So we're going to just get that off the stems. Try to avoid having any sticks in there for our garnish. And our flat leaf parsley. And this is just going to go on at the table as you're serving. This is the very last thing to happen to the whole dish. And you see Chef Caleb here is just going to give this a really fine chop. And this is the last thing that we're going to add, just sprinkled lightly on top when we're finished everything else. So once that's done, the mushroom should just be, you want to wait until you have this really nice color on the mushroom. So you can see that nice browning on the mushrooms. We're just going to give that a little splash of Marsala wine. Cognac is also, or cognac or brandy are also entirely traditional for this. We happen to have some nice Marsala on hand. And that's going to go in with the rest of the ingredients in the pot, which are just staying warm on the stove here. And then we're ready to serve at this point. So we're going to take just, it's a dish you kind of want to assemble. So you want to give everyone a nice few chunks of that beautiful tender beef. If the pearl onions haven't completely fallen apart, then you want to add a couple of those pearl onions. Definitely one big piece of that carrot. And then we're going to do one last thing to this great rich sauce. So this is a classic French technique called monter à beurre, which basically means to lift with butter. We are going to reduce this sauce in a pan, and we're going to add some cold butter. We're just going to gently swirl that in until it is completely melted and incorporated into that beautiful gravy. And it just gives you that little extra thickness, that last little bit of unctuousness, and once it's fully combined, you can pour it over the rest of your ingredients in your plate. And you can see that dark, rich sauce. It's got a lot of flavor. It's got a lot of butter in it, I'm not going to lie. And that's it. A little sprinkle of that beautiful garnish on top, and you are done. This is an amazing recipe. It is really delicious. It's got a lot of flavor. It is warm. It's hearty. Really impresses guests. It is a lot of work, not going to lie, but it is definitely worth it. I do recommend you try this. And we're going to have all of the ingredients as usual in the description below. If you like this recipe, please do like and subscribe. And if you have any recipes you'd like to see Chef Caleb try on the channel, please let us know in the comments below. And remember to love your food.